Hello and welcome back to the 2017 uLoL Campus Series. I'm Tom Serafos, and joining me once again is the prestigious Mark Zimmerman.
And I'm doing great, Tom. Patriots won the Super Bowl. I was unavailable to watch most of the time when they were losing, and then I just managed to catch the win, so I was pretty happy.
So what you're saying is they were a good luck charm? Is that what Tom Brady was praying about?
Yeah, and then the 3 touchdowns that they got before I showed up had nothing to do with me, of course.
Okay.
So.
Well, that's all right, because even though we may or may not have had the winner that you wanted in the Super Bowl, we do have plenty of League of Legends action heading your way.
Right, so let's review the tournament structure then. We've separated all the teams into 4 regions and divided each of those regions into groups of 6. Teams play within their group, and the top 2 teams from each group advance to our single elimination playoffs.
So let's take a look at the schedule. This week, we're going to feature Georgia Tech versus Clemson, and next week, we're going to take a look at Western Kentucky University versus Kansas State. But the matchup we want to talk about is the one today. Georgia Tech versus Clemson. Both of these teams are at 2-1, and both of them suffered losses at the hands of Virginia.
Right, but there is 2 different stories. Of course, Georgia Tech was one of the most dominant teams in uLoL last year. They were featured in their match when they beat Florida State in group play, and then they made it all the way to the semifinals before unfortunately losing to the eventual champions, UBC 3-0.
Well, them and everybody else in uLoL last year. Georgia Tech told us that they're focused on their macro plays this year and, of course, on constant improvement, and they have high hopes to try to make it all the way this year.
And, of course, on the other side, and the team that they are facing today is Clemson. Clemson wasn't in the round of 32 last year, but they're a team with a lot to prove. They had 2 really dominant wins so far this season, and they're looking to add another one to their belt.
Yeah, and this is another important game for both of these teams. With Virginia leading the group at 3-0, today is really going to determine who has a chance of grabbing a hold of that second place spot and potentially a place in the playoffs.
Right, and Georgia Tech is the more experienced team, like we kind of mentioned. They have been in the collegiate scene a lot longer. They had a better year last year, and they're the only team who managed to take a game off of Virginia, who is 3-0, like you just said. So obviously Clemson's going to have to dig deep here to hopefully take the game away from Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and since both of them lost, Clemson did wind up suffering a 0-2 defeat at the hands of Virginia. So like we said, could have very, very big playoff implications this early on in the group stage.
All right, well, let's take a look at the roster for Georgia Tech. In the top lane, we got Judgment missing an E, Jungle, Sky, Shapir, or I'm going to assume that's supposed to be Sapphire. Mid, Is That Him, AD Carry, Asian Devil or Asian Devil, depending on what you want to say, and support Rice Fox.
Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the rift, we have Clemson. In the top lane, it's Hawkeye TB. In the jungle, Think You Can Dance. Mid lane is Vici. Their ADC is ADC Mike, and their support is Isolated.
All right, well, 2 very interesting team names, as always. Something about the collegiate scene, not having to go through the whole riot approval process for their names.
Or spell check.
Right, apparently. I'm sure we'll get into that at some point during this game.
That's okay. We don't have to go into the exact names of everything, because we can jump right into picks and bans for game number 1 between both of these teams. Like we said, kind of a lot of, not even just pride on the line, but a lot on the line in the group stage already, as both of these teams tied it up. They lost to the same opponent, so this is going to have really big implications heading into the playoff stage, which is still many weeks away, actually. So.
Right, it's not like, it's a nail in the coffin depending on who wins this one, but it is very big whenever you are going up against someone who you're directly competing with that spot for to get that win, because you never know who else you're going to get the wins from. So going to be very interesting to see.
And the biggest thing as we're about to hop into picks and bans for game number 1 is really going to be, does the experience from Georgia Tech carry over? I mean, they made it to the playoffs last time around. They did lose to UBC, but they were extremely dominant in the Southern Division. Clemson is the complete opposite of that, being a team that's basically brand new.
Right, and you would think that experience would help a lot, especially in the draft phase where you tend to know already more about your teammates, how they like to play, what champions suit your team better. You have that experience. Is that him, a returning member who was very important last year for Georgia Tech, so going to keep my eye on him in particular for this series. In terms of bans already, we see Georgia Tech taking out Ivern. On the blue side, Clemson has banned away Corky on the red side. Pretty interesting bans. Neither of those would be considered super OPs, but they are things that are extremely strong. In solo queue, Ivern and now Vi being banned away, seems like Georgia Tech is really targeting Think You Can Dance in the jungle.
Yeah, I guess they really don't want to see what kind of moves he could put on them, utilizing some of those champions. One of the big interesting things is going to really be, like, as you mentioned, Is That Him already being targeted away. Corky we've seen definitely be more of a mid lane pick, more than an AD carry pickup. I really want to see where like the research comes in from behind them, because with Georgia Tech being more of that prestigious university in the collegiate League of Legends scene anyway, and Clemson kind of being the new kids on the block, they may have a little bit more scouting information on them, but it looks like they are, since they are on red side this time around, kind of forced to ban away some of those OP picks, but it's left open a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they really didn't ban away the things that you're used to seeing, the Camille's, the LeBlancs, the Rengars, all that kind of stuff, so Georgia Tech really does have their pick for exactly what they want. They end up going with Maokai first, pretty much the considered to be the best tank overall in the top lane position. He is just kind of capable of everything, strong laning phase, good team fight, does a lot of damage while being very, very hard to kill, extremely strong pickup there.
Yeah, not only that, but that means that there's Camille in the top lane that's going to be going up against it, although with the Poppy locked in from Clemson side, it looks like they're committed to going into that tank versus tank matchup, which maybe it's a little bit telling as to what these champion pools are, but
we got a Warwick.
We got a brand new pick in the jungle. Warwick has been locked in, and this is something that we saw a little bit in the EULCS. We haven't necessarily seen in competitive play worldwide yet.
Right, and I think it's the kind of thing, whenever there's a new champion rework, there's not a ton of incentive to pick it up right away unless it is clearly busted, because it takes time to get accommodated to it in the professional scene. So, if you know how to play Kha'Zix, Rengar, Lee Sin, you're not going to pick up this, fringe-ish pick right away. So it'll take some time to get into the competitive scene. Obviously, in the collegiate scene, people aren't scared of picking it up right away. And then on the other side, Georgia Tech grabs the Rengar and Cassiopeia, building a really strong standard team comp here.
Yeah, Georgia Tech definitely has a lot of what you would consider kind of those power picks from each of those positions. The Rengar, which is kind of the version 1.0, and the Warwick is kind of like the follow-up version that isn't quite living up to its predecessor's hype. You have the Cassiopeia, who has been a very, very strong mid lane pickup. Of course, with the Rise picked up from the side of Clemson, it's a matchup that's not necessarily, normally if you see the Cassiopeia, you go for something like the Orianna, have a safer lane phase, kind of be able to abuse her with the range of the Orianna ball, but they opted to go for that, and a Draven picked up here from ADC Mike. This
is obviously a comfort pick. Draven is not the strongest champion right now, though with the lethality buffs, there have been a couple different builds that people have started going on him. Instead of going for a ton of AD, which is what people used to do, they're going just for more armor pen, and it can work with the new lethality buffs that came in. On the flip side, Georgia Tech grabs Ashe and Malzahar. They have a ton of lockdown securing those two in their comp now, and the last pick for Lulu is the counter pick that people often see in the Malzahar.
Yeah, and this has been a very interesting kind of draft phase altogether. Already, like, the big things that pop out is the fact that Kha'Zix left off the table, not picked and banned. Camille left off the table, not entirely picked and banned. We saw some very targeted bans coming out here, especially on the blue side out of the jungle pickups, and not necessarily a lot that has been kind of like, not a lot of what we expected even. They do want to go with some of their comfort picks, but it's not the ones we would expect either.
Right, and it is that kind of scene where, assuming you did some research, you looked at their solo queue champions, what they tend to play, then you can see that, well, they don't play Camille. We don't need to ban Camille necessarily. Same with something like the Kha'Zix. Like, no one, if neither player really plays that champion, you don't need to waste a ban on it if you've done your research.
Oh, well, then again, solo queue may have banned it out for them all entirely.
Yeah, I want to learn it, I just can't.
Yeah. So what we do have is, as we look into game number 1, we can look at the draft results to kind of just go over everything, because there's a lot of information to digest here. The Warwick pick is going to be the big thing, the opt into the tank versus tank matchup, and of course the Draven pickup from that side as well.
Right, and of course for Georgia Tech, I like what they've done with their team comp. They have a ton of single target CC, and they can get a ton of picks off, assuming you start off with a Warwick, or a Rengar, or an Ashe Arrow, or a Malzahar. It's so easy to follow up, and there you have the Maokai as well. So they have a very strong pick comp coming in.
Yeah, they definitely do, and we've seen already kind of in the North American Challenger scene what the synergy of an Ashe and a Malzahar can do, especially at level 6. And if you have any sort of assistance coming out of the jungle, or the top lane in this case with the Maokai's Twisted Advance, it's going to be a lot of lockdown potential. And like you mentioned, Draven, the fact of the matter is he can be a very big carry. One of his weaknesses is while he has a lot of upfront damage, his mobility is extremely low. And if you're able to jump on top of a primary target like that, you could be in a world of hurt.
Right, and both AD carries, obviously, is kind of the meta for immobile AD carries, so Warwick the same way, he can easily hop onto the Ashe and get a pick off onto her.
Yeah, so we'll have to see. Mark, I got to get your opinion now. Who do you like better in this matchup?
I got to go with Georgia Tech. Obviously, I think they're a little bit of a stronger team coming into this matchup, and then I really like the way their draft came together. It's obviously more standard, and I have a huge bias for standard team comps, especially when it's on the team that I expect to win anyway. So I'm looking for Georgia Tech to win this one.
See, normally I like disagreeing with you, but it's really difficult to go against somebody who made it all the way to the semifinals of playoffs last time. I'm really liking the Georgia Tech composition as well. So
yeah, it's one of those ones that's very easy to execute. You just throw your ult out, and if it hits somebody, pile on them. If it misses, don't go in.
Yeah, so we'll have to see how things wind up going in game number 1, but we got our predictions. We'd love to hear yours. So of course, get on Twitter and let us know by tweeting hashtag Georgia Tech or hashtag Clemson, and send on over to @uLoL. So Mark, it's time to get into game.
All right, let's get into game. I want to see especially how this Warwick pans out. It is the thing that I want to keep my eye on probably the most. Most of this other stuff, we've seen it before. Maybe the Draven would be interesting to watch, but just seeing exactly what it can do, because I think it is one of those ones where a lot of people say it's not that strong, but some people say it's great, depending on who you ask. I know the EU junglers tend to favor it a little bit more, and they were one of the people who was quick onto the Ivern pick as well,
Right.
so there might be a little bit of a quicker learning for the EU junglers, so maybe they're right on Warwick once again.
Well, a lot of this kind of sentiment around Warwick has been the fact that he's basically lesser Rengar. His kit kind of does very similar things, minus the large amount of damage that you have coming out of Rengar.
Which is what tends to make him a little broken.
A little bit, but I mean, on this kind of team, you have the Ryze, who's going to have that ridiculous Ryze late game damage. You have the Draven, who does deal a lot of upfront damage, especially in the early game due to his spinning axes. Doesn't really have kind of a parallel to that on the opposite side from Georgia Tech, at least in the early stages of the game.
Right, they're really a team that's going to be looking to farm out a little bit more. The only really strong bully power pick that you tend to see is the Malzahar, and Cassiopeia into the Ryze matchup is favored, so they have two places that they can kind of get advantages. But assuming the Lulu plays well, it does often neutralize a lot of the strengths of the Malzahar pick. But if you're not careful, we've even seen in the LCS, even level 1, the Malzahar pick can do a lot of work.
Yeah, especially with those Voidlings. They've done some very interesting things with the Voidlings being able to tank up jungle camps, but it looks like on the side of Clemson, the duo lane moving in through their own blue buff area are a little bit hip to that, and they will just kind of passively wait. It looks like both of these bottom lanes actually were trying to get a cheeky little level 1 playoff, but both of them
right. I think Clemson was looking to catch them rotating back after leashing in the jungle, find out that they're not there, and instead Georgia Tech goes for a very interesting start where they tank the wave a little bit to get it to push back onto their side potentially, but there's some heavy trading going on already.
Yeah, one of those problems is if you're against a Draven in the early levels here, he's just going to provide a lot of damage with those spinning axes. So tanking up some minions could be the deciding factor, but as you mentioned, RiceFox already trading back and forth with some Malzahar damage of his own.
Right, and we see Warwick already on the top side looking to get a cheesy level 2 gank off onto the Maokai. Looks like he was spotted pretty early, and Maokai's going to walk away. Don't know if he'll have to burn anything. Nope, just going to have to turn around. And that's pretty punishing to have that not work out that way. Rengar clears relatively quickly, and as you see, he's already on his 3rd camp where Warwick has just done his buff, and now he's not on the right side to get a good, clear path off.
That may have been one of the most uneventful jungle ganks I think I've seen in a very long time.
Right, and I mean the Poppy was level 1, and I don't think she took Q or E right away, so there's no setup CC for that to really work, and Warwick doesn't bring his own, so I'm not quite sure what they were looking for there.
It was more of a zoning gank than anything, but as you mentioned, now that Warwick going to be slightly behind in his jungle pathing and has opted to go for the Krugs camp right after that, it's going to take a very long time considering even with his E early on, it's not going to have a lot of kind of the AoE wave clear to get rid of all those little Krugs.
Right, he's going to be very slow to get back onto the map, assuming he goes for a full clear, which is what I would assume he's doing, starting the Krugs instead of just running down. But on the flip side, we see Sky Shapire.
Shapire?
Yeah, I don't know if it's maybe it's like a little French pronunciation or something, but
Shapire.
Yeah. Someone's got to teach Georgia Tech how to spell. I get they're a tech school, they care more about math and computers and stuff, but come on. Jugman in the top lane, Sky Shapir in the jungle. Come on here, guys.
RiceFox hitting a little too many buttons on his keyboard.
Yeah.
Asian Devil just forgetting multiple vowels exist in words.
I mean, to be fair, that is a pretty common internet spelling of it, so.
I guess so, but if you're going to hamper on them for one thing, you might as well just go the full distance here.
Sure.
Looks like the trades are going to be going back and forth in the bottom lane. That Malzahar dealing a lot of trade damage against the Draven. There was a ward in the river that spotted out Rengar, so they are going to back up from the side of Clemson.
Right, and we see that Rengar is not done yet. He's going to go potentially for a blue buff invade, but actually just drops the ward off and turns back on the Scuttle Crab. Relatively low health. I like not overextending there and risking giving up first blood for pretty minimal gains.
Yeah, and he does wind up having that red buff, so he will have a little bit of extra passive regeneration on his HP, but they are going to spot out Warwick, who has actually gone back early on, picked up a long sword and rejuvenation beads off of that early back timing, but his red buff expired. He's going to pick himself up a blue buff, but as you mentioned, Rengar not really in a position to kind of punish that one, just keeping track of where he is. We'll go back, pick up a skirmisher saber of his own.
Right, as we continue to see heavy trading down the bot lane, going relatively in the favor of Georgia Tech. We see Clemson support getting low, Georgia Tech AD carry getting low, so kind of lopsided damage in that way. But Malzahar really likes playing aggressively in the lane, and he's been able to get a lot of damage done onto that side of Clemson. So overall, the Lulu counter pick not looking too hot right now, but Clemson does have a CS lead.
Yeah, and you also kind of really That's a factor in the Lulu counter pick really hits its stride when you're at level 6. Sure, you can trade against Voidlings very effectively, do your help picks kind of passive, having those little extra shots. But when you want to get into that wild growth to kind of really save or interrupt the target if Malzahar is too close, that's where it really winds up coming in to be a factor here. And as you mentioned, the kind of target selection, the Draven's being able to go relatively unharmed, but the Malzahar's not taking a lot of damage because of his passive shield. And as you saw right there, Malzahar loves trading, but he also loves trading effectively. He gets that shield up, pops the E onto Draven, just the Malefic Visions, and continues to go back and forth.
Right, and you're touching on the Lulu at 6 point. I actually think it works pretty well within Clemson's comp. You can have the Warwick, you can speed him up, so he gets a longer ult range. He goes flying in there, locks somebody up, your team follows up, and then you have the Lulu ultimate to knock up anyone who's trying to peel the Warwick. So they do have a lot of lockdown in CC as we see some trading on the top side. Blue doesn't look like too much is going to happen, given that it is 2 tanks.
Yeah, well, we've seen that matchup go pretty interestingly so far in the collegiate scene overall.
Right, I mean, the amount of times we've said it's 2 tanks before the top lane explodes into blood, you know, it's a little surprising.
Normally you don't see a Maokai and a Nautilus getting solo kills on each other, but if you watched last week, you definitely saw a bunch of that. Then again, you also don't see a Nautilus solo killing a Fiora 7 times.
I mean, that was an interesting series, we'll put it that way.
If you guys did not get a chance to see that, then you should go back in time and watch, because there's VODs available.
I don't think you need to go back in time to watch VODs.
You need to build a time machine. It's a tech school, they can do it.
You're just assuming Georgia Tech wants to go back and watch that?
Maybe. I mean, if you eventually play against them in the playoffs, that'd be great study material.
Yeah. Just looking at the CS though in the top lane, it's actually very surprising to see Poppy grab basically a 20 CS lead already. Like we were saying, it is a pretty even matchup. There's no reason to be down that much aside from the fact that you're just trading much better over the course of the laning phase and being able to last hit. So, you know, we were talking about Georgia Tech not having a ton to do in the early game, but they still shouldn't really be falling behind quite like that.
Yeah, even though you think You Could Dance kind of made an appearance top lane, I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as a gank. It seems like Judgment's kind of been spooked a little bit ever since, and it's just kind of been a little bit more passive. Even we saw earlier the trades going back and forth with Hawkeye on the top lane, getting a little bit of the worst end of that, and now we see him kind of moving down, getting his roam on. There is a control ward in there. The cleanse has already been popped by Ryze. He is also going to have to pop his flash, and Judgment will burn 2 summoner spells for that. Ooh, is that him? Does not connect with the parallel.
Seems like a little too much of an overextension there on the side of Georgia Tech. It would have been really nice to see them save the Rengar ult there and then try and come in with it later with the Ryze having no ult, or no summoners, excuse me. So a little unfortunate that the first Rengar ult goes to waste, but he's not quite the old Rengar who, if you missed the first 1 or 2 ultimates, you fell very far behind and became relatively useless. The new Rengar is a threat throughout the entire game.
Yeah, and it seems like they really wanted to expend that many ultimates because they brought the Maokai down from top lane and kind of wanted to get some validation. As you did mention already, behind in CS means that he was kind of even falling further and further behind, even lost his wards in the river due to the Poppy coming back to lane with a control ward as well. As we continue to see additional trades in the bottom lane. The side of Georgia Tech has hit level 6 though, so there is the combination of that Ashe Enchanted Crystal Arrow and the Malefic Vision, the Nethergrass coming out from Malzahar, which they could hit before the opposing side hits level 6, as they are only level 5 down there.
Right, but it is a little scary too, as we see Poppy trading onto the Maokai, misses the empowered auto attack, still flashes and tries to get the knockup. Judgment flashes away as well.
Yeah, did not get the stun against the wall right there. Hawkeye a little mispositioned on that charge, but still getting the better end of the Maokai in all of these trade situations.
Right, and it's very lucky that Asian Devil had shot out his Hawk Shot just to spot out the Warwick in the bot river. Otherwise, the big concern when you're playing against the new Warwick is you get low, that blood scent goes out, and now you don't know if he's chasing you down going in for a cleanup kill. So it can be very hard to know how heavily you can trade once you both start getting lower and lower, because you might just be opening yourself up to be collapsed on very rapidly. And like I said, that time, they knew that he was in the bot river already, didn't need to freak out quite as much, but that is always a huge concern, even in tank versus tank matchups.
That's also kind of like the factor you can't, it's like an intangible factor almost, as we are going to see on the bottom side here, a flash forward from Thinking He Can Dance, tries to engage with the Infinite Duress, will not wind up landing with that one, but the Nethergrass is turned around. He goes, you know what, I got a suppression of my own, but there we see the Wild Growth being used to kind of counteract that, keeping Thinking He Can Dance alive. Sky Sapphire is coming in, and Thinking He Can Dance is going to get bowled up and taken down for first blood.
That's one of the weaknesses of the new Warwick, is once you go flying in there with your ultimate, if you don't actually connect it, you kind of just end up in the middle of nowhere. We see Georgia Tech turn back onto him, and with the Rengar being able to turn in with a counter gank, they're able to pick up another kill. As we see Hawkeye going a little too aggressive in the top river, is that him collapsing from the mid lane, Judgment gets the last slow off. It might be enough to finish him off, though he does get the heroic charge to a creep.
Yeah,
but now he's pinned up against the top lane.
Now it's really just going to be, is he going to be able to survive long enough to deny an assist? And it looks like no, so we're going to be another kill picked up by Georgia Tech on the top side.
It's going to be a quick 2-0 as fights break out in both the top and bottom lane. And Georgia Tech's going to try and push down this bot lane outer turret, get up the first turret gold onto their side. They got to be happy with the way this game started out.
Yeah, Georgia Tech has just kind of exploded in the last couple of minutes with that gank in the bottom side and then just a trade kill with the roam in the top side river as well. So very good stuff. We said earlier that level 6 was kind of going to be when Georgia Tech's composition starts to turn things online, and as soon as that happened, it did.
Right, and we'll get another look at exactly what happened in the bot lane. We can see that there was some heavy trading going on, which kind of made the recalling Warwick decide, you know what, I'll stick around. And he doesn't have a ton of mana. He goes for the flash ultimate. Good reaction flash there to get away. And then once that's done, you see that he has no way to get back out, blowing his flash to get in range. So he has to get the Lulu ultimate burned on top of him. Then the exhaust trades back onto Draven, and he gets focused down with the Ash Arrow. And all this time, Rengar's coming in slowly over time, gets his ultimate back up, and is able to join the fight and pick up a kill. And then on the top side, this is just kind of that. You want to make a play thinking. You see a fight go wrong in the bot lane. You know both junglers are down there, so you think, hey, I'll 1v1 this guy on the top side because I don't have to worry about the junglers. But you got to worry about the mid laners, and we see the ghosting Cassiopeia able to collapse onto this fight.
Yeah, and Hawkeye, we know how this winds up ending. Thinks he can get away. Unfortunately, will wind up falling to Is That Him and Judgment in the top side. Meanwhile, we did see Is That Him gets a kill on Vici, but not at the cost of his own life.
Right, and it did give up the kill to Draven, who was able to cash in on his stacks. We saw around 630 gold there show up, which, you know, is pretty good given the fact that despite what happened in the bot side, he didn't go down there, so he had been stacking those up for quite a while.
It's also going to compensate for the fact that he went back and picked up a first item Quicksilver Sash to kind of counteract the Malzahar ultimate and a lot of the CC that he's bringing down.
Can't say I like that one, Tom. Draven is an aggressive pick, and if your first item is defensive itemization, that's basically conceding what you want to do with Draven, which is become a huge bully and snowball out of control. One
of the things you mentioned in Champion Select was the fact that, hey, if they lock onto Draven, he's got no way to escape. Yeah, QSS is a way to get out of there, but like you said, not a lot of damage coming out from that, as we did see Georgia Tech picking up the Cloud Drake, and now going to pick themselves up a Warwick, as Think You Can Dance thought he could contest, but he cannot.
Thought he could contest. Think you can
dragon?
Think you can dragon? Yeah, we can dragon, and then we're gonna kill you after.
Well, Hawkeye's actually kind of come down from the top side as well. Sky Sapphire going back in. I'm gonna call him Sapphire for now. It's just gonna happen.
Yeah.
So he wants to jump into the Poppy. The Poppy is gonna wind up knocking him straight up with the ultimate. Vici's come back from death, and Is That Him is also around. Hawkeye's extremely low. The flash forward from Sky Sapphire will pick up the kill. Vici just came back to lane. He's just gotta hightail it out of there.
Everything's going off the rails on the side of Clemson here. They're overstaying in places that they should really back out. Warwick goes down. You know it's going to be a 2v3 best case scenario. And then we see Hawkeye thinking that he can get a little bit of a trade back. Doesn't think he's going to go down. Ultimately, the Cassiopeia comes in and helps the Rengar out. And it's just overextensions on the side of Clemson, not knowing when to really back off.
Yeah, and we actually did see that the rotation from Georgia Tech to the top side of the map has been keeping the Clemson bottom lane up there and busy. That tower taking a lot of damage already as Asian Devil and Rice Fox trying to get another tower down from their side. So already a 3,000 gold advantage in favor of Georgia Tech. And it's just kind of all exploded out of some very nice kind of just openings that were created just based off of hitting power spikes on their champions. It wasn't even like they made a really solid rotation. It was just like, oh, we're level 6 now. We know what our champions can do, and we know what our composition can do. As it looks like Think You Can Dance, trying to make something happen, is Guanya going to get the infinite duress down onto the Ash, but he's going to get a lot of trade damage when Rengar comes in. He's going to try to donate that kill over to Ash. Think You Can Dance stays alive for a little bit longer, and Maokai will come and pick up 2 kills for himself. Ash gets a third.
It's a whitewash, Tom.
Fourth winds up going over to Maokai, and that is just disaster for Clemson.
Where is Vici in any of these fights? He's the Rise. He's got that ability to warp around the map, and we haven't seen it be used yet. I know he's not level 11 yet, which is when it generally comes online, but you got to be able to follow the Cassio a little bit here. They keep getting odd man fights while he's stuck in the mid lane, and once again, the top side of the map, which should potentially be a 4v4, turns into a 5v4 because Cassiopeia is there first.
Well, I was just saying, hey, Georgia Tech really didn't move around the map to get any of those advantages, and then they kind of shut me up right there by just moving around the map and getting a massive advantage as Vici tries to respond by taking away the Raptor camp and then running through his opponent's jungle. Is going to use the Realm Warp to just get himself out of the enemy jungle.
I mean, at least he used it.
He did use it.
And it was a successful use case. So there we go. We're getting there.
But we are going to get a chance to look at that play where he could have potentially used it to help his team up. But like you said, the Cassiopeia makes it up here first.
Right, and we see that the Warwick comes in for a gank, wants to get past the Malzahar, uses his Q to get past him to set up his ultimate range. And unfortunately, by the time he's able to get past all that, they've already disengaged fairly well. The Rengar counter gank comes in and picks up the rest. And to be fair to Vici, to roam up there, given that they did not have control on the topside river, you don't know what you're going to face check. But I mean, ultimately, that just makes that play that they're forcing also very risky to go for. So definitely not the smartest play in the world.
They have given us out. Hands on thing you can dance. He is going to take a lot of damage with Malefic Visions ticking away as well. Everybody from the side of Clemson is trying to back away. Georgia Tech, they're going to take one tower, use that ultimate, and like you said, if they use an ultimate, they don't have to go in, they're just going to back away.
Right, that's what's great about the Ash arrows. It's fairly non-committal. You pop that, you pop the Rengar ult, see if they're out of position. They are not, they are grouped as 5. They move back under their mid-inner turret, and you just disengage and back up. Unfortunately, the timing of it makes it such that there's a wave pushing into the top side of the map, so we see Judgment have to make his way up there, and Clemson's going to try and get a counter push on mid, though I'm not sure if they're going to be able to get anything.
Well, the Mercurial Scimitar was finished in its entirety by Draven as his first item, so he did convert the Quicksilver Sash into a damage item, although I'm not too sure about the actual build path to get there.
We talked about the potential lethality build. This is not that build. This is quite different in what it intends to do.
This is a very defensive kind of setup. So the Mercurial Scimitar does have the QSS active, so you can just kind of cleanse yourself from some sort of CC or form of suppression. In this case, the Malzahar ultimate is the biggest one. The Cassiopeia Petrifying Gaze is another big one. Does give you a bit of a burst of movement speed, which in addition to Draven's W, will give him a little bit more mobility in team fights. We did kind of pick on him for being a little bit of a less mobile carry, but like you said, it kind of goes against what Draven wants to do. You don't see multiple BF sword items picked up. You don't necessarily see a bloodthirster for the raw amounts of damage. And as we mentioned, with Vici not even making an appearance in a lot of these fights, a lot of the early game damage on Clemson was reliant on that Draven.
And we see the return of our good friend, the Rift Herald. I don't think we saw one taken last week. Here,
That's
Georgia
true.
Tech brings him back week 3.
It's because we didn't give him the Rift Herald Campus Series jersey.
Oh, correct.
Yeah, I still got to talk to
You got to
my
get
friends.
those Riot artists on there.
Yeah, John C. Riot. We'll get right on it.
I liked your positive spin on the Draven build. I'm going to go another way and just say it's not good, given the fact that you've taken a defensive support to shore up some of those potential weaknesses in what should be a counter matchup a little bit. You have the Lulu to try to ult people off. You have an E. You have Poppy to help zone, right? Like, you have tools to keep you alive. You need to trust your own individual mechanics and maximize your damage instead of being scared and building defensively, as we see.
Ooh, Enchanted Crystal Arrow into a Flash Nethergrass. Vici will survive, however, a flash away. The Wild Growth comes out as well. A flash throw from Asian Devil. Sky Sapphire's in the fight as well. They committed a lot here on the side of Georgia Tech, but Clemson can't turn it around. Asian Devil picks up a second kill on the Isolated, and now the Georgia Tech going for Dragon.
Yeah, they committed just enough. They pick up the 2 kills. They disengage exactly when they need to. Sky Sapphire not going down. Ultimately, he's going to be able to pick up the Ocean Drake off the back of that fight. And we see things continue to go really well for Georgia Tech. Now 11-1, 18.5 minutes into the game. Getting up close to a 10K gold lead. Not quite there yet. And every member on the team picking up a kill now.
Yeah, and we're kind of seeing the strength from Georgia Tech. This is a team that did make it to the playoffs last year in the campus series. This is the team that was extremely dominant in the South. They suffered defeat at the hands of Virginia, but they're kind of bouncing back from that one right now, and they're kind of looking really good in this game against Clemson, who, like as we mentioned, implications for this in their group, it could be the difference between 2nd and 3rd place. It could be the difference between a playoff spot and a wild card spot.
Right, and I'm liking everything I see out of these guys. They definitely seem... I haven't seen anything I would criticize as outright bad. They have been playing extremely well in the lane matchups. The only potential problem was the one in the top lane. But other than that, you know, you can take a 10 CS deficit if you're going to play TPs well. And to Judgment's credit, he TP'd into a lot of fights. As we see, Clemson trying to get something going here.
Yeah, he winds up using the Realm Warp after the Paralyzing Gaze is used. Thinking he could dance, will wind up blocking up, but he winds up going down. Agent Devil in the front getting the first kill. Sky Sapphire will jump in. He was extremely low, but it's going to be at the cost of a lot of Clemson lives in this one. Another Grass goes out as 3 kills are picked up by the Cassiopeia.
I was just talking bad about Judgment's laning phase, but he just solo killed the Poppy under Terra. What happened there?
I don't know. I guess Georgia Tech just turns it on. He wanted to get a triple kill on a fight earlier. Another triple kill happens on the opposite side of the map, and this is just Georgia Tech running rampant.
Right, I mean, he was 4-0-2, and we know Maokai can get pretty oppressive when he picks up a couple kills early into the game, but I did not think he'd be able to be solo killing an enemy tank under an inhib turret.
He's got 2 bubble advantage. He's got a 40 CS advantage. Sunfire Cape and Ninja Tabby completed. A Spectral Cowl picked up as well. Another tower is going down on the side of Georgia Tech. That's now 5-0 in the tower game, and Georgia Tech were making things happen, even though Clemson was trying to. They use the Realm Warp aggressively here, and they're trying to make something happen, but just couldn't finish.
I don't mind the idea of trying to force a play here, but you know that it's still not really an odd man play, and when you're playing from behind, you need to actually be able to get an advantage somewhere. So if they have been channeling the Poppy TP, early and gotten behind him, as we see that solo kill come in. If they've been channeling the Poppy TP at the same time that Realm Warp comes in to cut in the backside of the play, and Poppy can hopefully push someone forward, potentially I can see that working. I know that the TPs were even, so it is very hard to get an odd man play, but just warping in the Rise kind of by himself to cut off the Cassiopeia was not quite enough. A good try. They were able to pick up 1 kill, and I like that they're still being aggressive instead of just sitting there and losing like we see some teams do. But they are so far behind, it is very hard to find a favorable situation.
One of the things to point out in that Maokai dive top lane too is the fact he had no minions around him when he dove Poppy under the tower. He just kind of finished off the kill with some style.
So Maokai gets a little crazy.
Well, Georgia Tech are going to have to try to finish this game off with style, as the Enchanted Crystal Arrow will land on ADC Mike, but he does have the Mercurial Scimitar. Wild Growth winds up getting used on Vici already. Nethergrass is still available for Malzahar, though, and the Lulu's dead, so they're not going to have that option to kind of counteract the Malzahar ultimate in this siege. Baron has spawned on the map, though. We saw Rift Herald die. Baron will take its place, and it looks like that's where Georgia Tech is going to set their sights.
Right, they're going to just go and start this one off. We see Maokai pushing in the bot lane. They have not great wards for a TP flank, but if they do want to come in from that mid lane or potentially in the jungle right there, they have the option to. But we see Draven, one of the things that makes him annoying. As Think You Can Dance picks up a kill. They're going to get another one on the Rice Fox, collapsing now onto Sky Sapphire. He's low. Rise is trying to get in onto him. Hits the blind Q over the wall, picks him off, but is that him is not done yet. He's going to try and finish the rest of Clemson off.
And they turn onto the Baron too, so Clemson, Baron's going to get into the fight here as Cassiopeia will pick up a kill off of the Baron, getting him down. Judgment does wind up coming in, going on the Vici, and he's a very tanky Maokai. He's going to go through the... No! Rise will get knocked down before he goes through the Realm Warp, and now it's just a tale of 2 tanks, Mark. Poppy versus Maokai.
We saw how this one went last time. I don't think Judgment will want to keep going here. Looks like he does.
You wouldn't think so, but he may continue going. As he throws up the sapling, but it looks like he probably isn't going to catch anybody up. Actually, Hawkeye's going to go back in, isolated and kiting back and forth.
Maokai's healing. This is when you stop fighting him. You're doing negative damage.
I think Maokai realized he could probably kill the Lulu if he went onto her, and then they decided to back away.
Right, I think he's kind of like, oh, respawn timers are up. All right, let's settle down here. As we saw, Georgia Tech, trying to start off that Baron, they are extremely squishy. They don't have anyone who really is happy tanking it. It is a relatively early Baron. The only armor, it was cloth armor on the side of Sky Sapphire when they started it. So it was a very risky play to go for, given that they had only picked off a single member, the Lulu. As we see them going forward again here, trying to catch Clemson, sleeping in their base, coming off respawn timers, dealing with minion waves. But
this time they had the Maokai to tank it up. Before he was using the teleport, and the ward expired in the pit, so they didn't necessarily have a place for him to teleport, so he had to teleport outside of it. So he wasn't there to join the fight right away. But this one, no Whirling Death available. He's going to wind up getting stunned up, so Rengar is going to secure the Baron, and this time around Georgia Tech, they take a textbook Baron.
Right, I really like the decision to reforce it right after the first attempt. If the enemy team is not prepared to fight again, you can catch them off guard, which is exactly what happened there. And this time, like you said, they had the Maokai there, so it was a lot lower risk. If the team was ready, you don't back away at everyone at 25% health. Everyone's still full health as you're backing away.
But you did credit Clemson to the fact that while they were not being successful, they were still being aggressive and trying to make plays happen. Baron Pit is one of those spots where in the collegiate scene specifically, we've definitely seen the the attraction to it could be fatal, as it happened in that one. So Clemson tried to make something to turn that around, but unfortunately for them, they are still at an 11,000 gold deficit. And now with a Baron buffed up Georgia Tech, wailing away on the last outer tower. Things do not look great for Clemson, as they are going to get a decent amount of damage on the Asian Devil. They lock Judgment up in the front line. He's tanking the tower, so he's taking damage. I think you can dance onto getting suppressed and shut down. And now the tower has fallen. The floodgates are open. A flash forward from Asian Devil, getting his frost arrows down. Meanwhile, Sky Sapphire has gotten to the back line, picked up a kill on Draven. Rise has been chased off to the side by Judgment, and that's, well, rinse and repeat for Georgia Tech.
Right, I mean, that's just one of those situations where the turret's going down, one team's getting a little greedy trying to finish it off, baits Clemson into thinking they can take a fight, but they do finish the turret off, and then they're fighting 5v5 against a Baroned up 10k gold lead team with no turret to back them up. As we see, Georgia Tech's not done yet. They continue to dive into the base of Clemson.
The Poppycopter was used, but nobody wound up taking the trip back home. Baron buff minions in the base and 4 dead on the side of Clemson for just a little bit. That might be enough, though, to signal Georgia Tech is going to wind up going for the win. One Nexus tower is down. There's a couple of very low respawn timers here, so they have to be a little bit careful, but that's the second Nexus tower falling already. Taking a little bit of damage on the Nexus tower, but the pings to go back are there. Georgia Tech are going to take this one a little bit slow and steady.
Right, I don't hate this decision. I like the fact that you're not just trying to end the game. Even if they did overstay and die, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Clemson has to make up so much ground to get back into it, but there's no reason to make that mistake if you can avoid it.
And even going with the tried and true play. Steal away your opponent's blue buff, leave their jungle completely empty, go for the Ocean Drake that you're probably going to get about 50 seconds worth of use from, because as soon as you wind up recalling, buying your final items, you could just go for a push. You still have Baron buff on you. There's no outer towers left open. There's already been that top lane tower that's taken damage from the amount of times Maokai's pushed it down. I mean, Georgia Tech said that they wanted to work on their macro play this time around. They knew that they had returning players. They knew that they had the skill to make it to the playoffs, and they got decimated by UBC, but so did everybody last year.
Right, and this game, I mean, minus that one Baron call, that's really the only place you can really fault them for their macro gameplay decision making. And even then, it wasn't the worst idea in the world. It was just not a good one.
It had the proper setup. You had the Maokai split pushing, you had his teleport available, you had somebody that was around there dealing with him, and you had wards to teleport to. It's just maybe you're not used to the fact that the Warwick can jump over the wall and suppress your AD carry in the front line. The Whirling Death from Draven can hit multiple people, and as you mentioned, it's a 20-minute Baron. Maybe you're not used to the amount of damage Baron deals.
Maybe you're not used to being this far ahead. Who knows?
I mean, you could. That's also very, very true. But the rest of Georgia Tech have grouped back up in the mid lane. The Rengar ultimate has been popped, and it looks like instead of trying to just strangle them out, they're going straight for the jugular. Nexus is taking a lot of damage. Thinking he dances in the back line, trying to get on the Asian Devil with the paralyzing gaze and the Nethergrass come out. Hawkeye's going to wind up missing the Poppy ultimate. He's going to go down. Judgment's just zoning him away back onto the summoner platform all the way in their own base. The Nexus goes down, and Georgia Tech takes a 27-minute victory over Clemson.
28 kills in 27 minutes. More kills than minutes in the game just on their side. Very impressive performance out of Georgia Tech, and in particular, is that him. I talked about him coming into the game. I said he was going to be a very important person to watch. He got a number of roams off that made plays for his team where his mid lane opponent was not able to follow.
Right, he wound up using that Ghost extremely effectively, roaming up into the top lane, getting a kill on that lane that was at a CS deficit for the early stages. Not necessarily off of any sort of pressure or anything that was put up there, just because of the matchup that they were in. And I really also have to kind of credit their bottom lane. Like, they picked the Ashe and Malzahar combination. They played it aggressively into a Draven and Lulu, which you would kind of think is, we're going to pick these champions that go against that specific kind of duo lane combination. So very interesting.
Right, overall, a very impressive performance out of pretty much every member, showing that they have mastery over the meta, which I think is very important because those picks are favored for a reason. And when you show that you can compete on them, people need to start worrying about forcing you onto other more pocket pick champions.
So it was a 27-minute game, but a lot of stuff did happen. So let's take a look at the recap really quick, especially kind of where things started to go a little topsy-turvy for Clemson. Around 13 minutes into the game, Warwick tried to go for a gank, but this is what you mentioned with, is that him kind of moving and making the things happen from the beginning.
Right, and we see the Rengar warning was actually on Think You Can Dance. So they knew that this had a high chance of getting counter ganked. He showed good understanding of Warwick's kit to be able to get past the Malzahar and onto the AD carry, but it was just not a great play to go for. Obviously, they were ready for it. We saw Judgment's TP coming in extremely quickly. He's able to cut off that failed gank attempt, as well as the fact that the Cassiopeia was already roaming. I think she had just gotten her blue hand off, so she was already in position to cut into the river and follow up to the top side of the map.
Yeah, Georgia Tech had a lot of really good moves on the map, and they did have one little slip up where Clemson looked like they had a breath of life in them, but at this point in point in time was already like a 10,000 goal deficit. There was a Baron attempt at about 22 minutes. It was the first of 2 Baron attempts before the game was over, but Georgia Tech actually winds up getting wiped out in that fight.
Right, and we were talking a little bit about how that wasn't the best call to go for, given how early it was in the game. They don't really have a tank that they want to have deal with it. Their vision wasn't great. The Draven Sled ultimate, he was able to throw that in and chunk them out as they're already taking a lot of damage from the Baron. So we can take another look at exactly how that went so wrong for Georgia Tech.
Yeah, they had really good positioning with the Maokai in the bottom lane. He's actually by the blue buff to teleport, but there's a control ward in the pit, but he decides to teleport to one by the red buff.
Right, well, so the way that they had this set up in their mind is you bait them in with the Baron attempt, you TP in the Maokai behind, you get to flank off, CC's one of the carries, and then you turn off the Baron and kill them. The problem is that they were getting so low from Baron with the Draven ult that even though that was their plan, and it's a good plan in theory, now everyone's so low that the enemy team's just killing you on the Baron. They're not running away from your turn, they're just killing you. So it was a good idea in terms of what they wanted to do, but not actually appropriate for the game circumstances. We see it still didn't go that bad for Georgia Tech. Is that him was able to turn it back and pick up a couple kills. Judgment ultimately ends up getting into the fight. He's still an unkillable monster Maokai who's healing up more than the damage he's taking. So as much as we're criticizing this play, it wasn't the end of the world, and they were still so far ahead at the end of it that we saw them just go right back to Baron and pick it up.
Right, this game was really kind of a demonstration as to how powerful Georgia Tech has kind of become. There was a little bit of a flexing of muscles, kind of like you said. They picked a very straightforward, competitive, meta team composition, and they executed extremely well. That was the thing they wanted to do. They wanted to work on execution. They wanted to work on their macro play. There was that highlight right there. It's just kind of be like, hey, like they played an extremely clean game, and even the situation that went very poorly for them in that circumstance was a 3 for 4.
Right. Overall, very good game out of Georgia Tech. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll see if Clemson can come back in Game 2.
Hello and welcome back. We just watched Georgia Tech manhandle Clemson, and that's not an understatement, Mark.
No, not at all. When you have more kills than game time in minutes, then yeah, you kind of destroyed them.
Yeah, so we're going to go into picks and bans for the second match, and we'll have to see what changes Clemson makes to their draft phase, because although they had some very interesting picks with a Warwick and a Draven, their itemization and their impact in the game just weren't kind of worth going for that over some of the more powerful pickups that were available.
Well, that's what concerns me, is the fact that it doesn't seem like either team highly prioritizes the very OP champions. And so usually when you lose a game, you're like, all right, let's really change it up, and maybe we'll leave the OPs up, or we'll ban them all away or something. But here, both teams kind of ignored them. So I don't know how you change it up, given that you already showed a lot of pocket picks in the first game.
I mean, there was a Jhin and a Varus left available in the AD carry position. Both of them are kind of go-to picks. Varus kind of even being maybe one of the strongest AD carries on 7-2 right now, especially with the lethality changes. The Kha'Zix was left open. There was a Rek'Sai that we've seen being picked against the Rengar very often, if the Kha'Zix have been banned away. So we'll have to see, is in the picks and bans phase already, Clemson saying we don't want to deal with Rengar anymore.
Right, I think that's a good decision to make. Sky Sapphire looked very competent on the Rengar, able to turn a bunch of counter ganks and then close the game out pretty cleanly with it. He was not one of those over-aggressive Rengars jumping in and dying all the time, so that was good to see.
Calculated aggression.
Yeah, calculated is a great way to put it. As we see the Vibe ban come in on the side of Georgia Tech, still targeting Think You Can Dance pretty heavily. And honestly, I like that strategy. If Clemson's relying on their jungler to make a lot of plays in the early game, that's a great meta to do this. So you ban him out off his best champions and force him onto some of his weaker picks.
Right, and the Cassiopeia ban coming out from the side of Clemson. Now that they're on the blue side, they're able to kind of get a couple more target bans down, although their target bans also look like OP bans because they have the Malzahar as the third ban coming in that they did give away to Rice Fox. They definitely want to have a more steady matchup in the mid lane, as Vici looked like he was a little bit outclassed by Is That Him's Cassiopeia, and then the Malzahar matchup so that ADC Mike and Isolated, who early on in the lane phase are trading effectively, but once Georgia Tech's level 6 stride kind of hit, they looked a little bit lost.
Right, I'm going to be interested to see if Georgia Tech continues to play strong meta picks, because sure, you ban the Malzahar, but what if they play Zyra? Sure, you ban the Cassio, well, what if they pick the Ryze? Those are the kinds of things I want to keep my eye on in this next game, as we see Clemson taking the Maokai this time. They didn't want to let Judgment get his hands back on it. Sure, his initial first 10 minutes of laning phase didn't look that crazy, but once he got a little bit ahead, he snowballed really hard and started picking up solo kills even against the Poppy.
Diving under towers, inhibitor towers at like the 20-minute mark and such, but it looks like we're not going to see the redo of the match on the opposite side. Instead, is going to be Georgia Tech opting for the Nautilus against the Maokai matchup. We heard a lot about this matchup throughout the Campus series and the Challenger series of how it kind of goes, being a little bit Nautilus favored early, but then Maokai becomes an unkillable tree, and we are going to get a chance to see the Kha'Zix in the jungle, which will be picked up this side by Sky Sapphire.
Right, this was talking about a little bit where you start banning away what they played last game, which were all meta picks, but you're still giving them meta picks that hopefully they can perform on. Kha'Zix being the second best jungler behind Rengar, and Sky Sapphire is able to pick that up. On the side of Clemson, continuing to go with more pocket pick focused games, they go with the Olaf and the Vel'Koz, a champion that's kind of criminally underrated. People don't often talk about how strong Vel'Koz can be, but we saw it starting to get played a little bit at the end of LCS last year, kind of died back off with the new patch changes, and hopefully we get to see him make a little comeback now.
Well, one of the things that Vel'Koz was extremely good at dealing with was a lot of the kind of standard control mage picks. We saw him very often picked into Cassiopeias, picked into Victor, Azirs, those kinds of, the Azir specifically, as it would kind of consider that counter matchup. But now that we have like the realm of assassin rework and stuff, Vel'Koz doesn't necessarily deal with characters that get onto him that well.
Right, and he's going to be playing it into a Ryze that Georgia Tech picked up, as well as grabbing the Ashe again, a champion they looked great on. And I think the Vel'Koz Ryze matchup isn't as nice as some of the other standard control mage ones, where Ryze gets a lot more mobility just off his spell rotations and the speed that he gets. He's able to dodge those E's a little bit easier. He has the shield. So it's not going to be quite as easy, but Vel'Koz still obviously has the range advantage. Clemson finishing off their draft with the Jhin and Zyra going for a much more standard bot lane this time, which I'm very happy to see, and Georgia Tech counterpick with the MF.
Yeah, and this is very much so just kind of Georgia Tech going through with their own kind of, this is what's very strong, this is what we want to be able to play, this is what we practice, this is what we're going to go for, and Clemson kind of going for more of their own pocket picks again. Right,
and if we pull up the draft review, I like to talk about how just strong Clemson's poke draft is this time around. They have the strong front line with the Maokai, but then they have Vel'Koz, Zyra, Jhin, 3 very strong picks for being able to handle zone control and push people around and stop them from being able to get in on your team.
Right, so overall, if we take a look at the results of the draft, you can see that kind of poke coming out, the Vel'Koz in the mid lane. We have the Jhin that's going to be able to lock everybody down and kind of zone people away. But then, like we said, on the flip side for Georgia Tech, very kind of standard composition. You have your tank top laner, you have your carry-style jungler in the Kha'Zix. You have a very powerful pickup of Ryze in the mid lane. This time it's Is That Him that's going to be utilizing it instead of Vici. And then a very powerful kind of bottom lane combination. The Ashe has initiation. The Misfortune is the counter pickup to the Zyra, but also kind of provides for that team fight presence. It's going to give Kha'Zix the ability to shred through people and really get those resets.
Right, and the Ryze is a very important pick here because, like we mentioned, the zone control on the side of Clemson, Ryze has a way to potentially bypass all that in the form of his ultimate, being able to warp people directly onto the back line. So seeing if you can transport Judgment onto them, maybe following up off the back of an Ashe arrow, Georgia Tech does have the tools to deal with this very zone-heavy Clemson team comp.
Well, as a meta slave, I still really got to like the Georgia Tech kind of lineup here. I mean, I'm a Varus, Ashe, Jhin kind of guy right now because that's all that's going to be very, very popular. I mean, is there anything that Clemson has shown you out of this draft that kind of makes you change your mind? Or?
Yeah, I mean, they are playing a lot more meta this time, especially around the bot lane. The Olaf, despite not being the strongest pick in the game, it is still one that we see being played a lot in regions all over the world. So I like that pick a little bit better as well. And so I'm going to be looking forward to see what they can do with this, not stuck on a Warwick and Draven and Lulu. They have a lot more power picks available to them this time around.
Well, you got our opinion on this, so we want to know who you guys think is going to win the second match. Tweet either hashtag Georgia Tech or hashtag Clemson over to @uLoL and make your own pick. So as we're heading into the second game, we'll have to see here. Like you did mention, the Olaf, a little bit more of a scene pick in competitive play. The Vel'Koz, an underappreciated pick in competitive play. Is that going to be enough for them to kind of bounce back and take this?
Well, I think it's going to be very important to see how the laning phase goes for them this time around. We saw a relatively inactive first 6 or 7 minutes, but then once people got their sixes, Georgia Tech basically took over the game, being a lot more coordinated, able to make better use of all their ultimates once they finally got their hands on them.
Well, Vici, level 6 mastery Vel'Koz. So he's got himself a decent amount of Vel'Koz games under his belt. Either that or a very few amount that are extremely, extremely good games.
Right.
But we didn't necessarily see a lot of early aggression out of the level 1. We did kind of see the situation where Georgia Tech and Clemson both kind of wanted to go for a cheesy brush play at level 1 when Clemson invaded and kind of went into the tri-brush and waited for the path through the leash backwards. But Georgia Tech was not there. They're waiting in their own bottom lane brush. We'll see if there's any sort of aggression like that early on, but it's a little bit more difficult to do so with the Zyra, considering if you are not in the brush at a certain time, your passive's going to pop off and there'll be seeds that give you away.
Right, a little bit hard to be sneaky like that. As we see both teams not looking like they're going for anything too crazy. Clemson has dropped some early wards down the bot side river, make sure that there's no invade coming in, as that is where Olaf looks like he's going to be starting with his bot lane helping him leash. Kha'Zix has not headed up to the top side yet, so it's safe to assume he will be starting on his blue as well.
And we'll have to kind of keep our eyes peeled as to where the junglers really focused first. Sky Sapphire went for a full clear early on before even making an appearance out of the lane phase, whereas we did see Think You Could Dance trying to make things happen with the early level 2 gank by going 1 buff and then directly into lane. He kind of showed up. And that was his entire gank, but we'll see if he can be more effective this time.
Right, and I think it has a much better chance of being effective. When you look at what Warwick's kit is able to do at level 2, it's really not that impressive, whereas Olaf is a monster even from level 1 with his axe spam. So there's always the chance that he goes for another cheesy gank here and is able to actually pick up a kill on, this relatively mobile bot lane of Georgia Tech. But have to see what he does after he finishes his Krugs off. Not sure if he's going to look to go aggressive. A lot of people like getting low in the jungle and going for that early power clear on Olaf, which if you can't get low and then go for a gank. You end up basically suiciding if you do that.
Although it does help with your very quick clear, because the lower you are, the faster you attack. So it's a little bit of a trade-off here, but we'll wind up seeing Olaf looking like he's going to be going for a full jungle clear as he makes his way towards the top side. Mirrored on the opposite side by Sky Sapphire and his Kha'Zix as well. And the bottom lane, we already saw some very aggressive trading. You mentioned a little bit more immobile on the side of Georgia Tech. Technically got 2 marksmen, so there's a lot of damage down there.
Yep, that's one of the things, and it is one of the good matchups into Zyra. So despite Zyra being considered one of the strongest supports, MF, especially when played well, does a fantastic job against it. And we just see how annoying that E spam can be for MF. And then once she gets her ultimate at 6, you just arrow the Zyra, and both people drop their damage onto her, and she tends to die.
It's the only time I've seen a plant not like it when somebody makes it rain.
Haha! Not bad, Tom, not bad.
I've been practicing that one for like weeks.
Then that's pretty sad.
Yeah.
We see Judgment getting the better early game this time around, has a small push going on to Hawkeye, but nothing too substantial as both junglers' paths are ending on the top side of the map, so we could see them bump into each other, but looks like Thingy Can Dance is instead going to continue clearing around, not going for anything too crazy.
I want to see if Hawkeye is able to get the same kind of CS advantages in that top lane match that we got in game number 1 as we continue to see aggressive trades on the bottom side. But Judgment, the one criticism we had on him was his early lane phase. He did not necessarily get pressured a lot, but in the Poppy versus Maokai matchup where he was the Maokai, he was zoned off by about 20 CS, which is something you just don't normally see when the two tanks are kind of content just hitting minions more than they hit each other. Now that he's in the Nautilus matchup, we've heard during the Challenger Series in an interview with Brandini, from Delta Fox, where he was telling us that it's generally very Nautilus favored in the early game just because of his ability to wave clear. So if there is still going to be that CS deficit in the early game from the side of Georgia Tech, that could be something that they need to potentially work on.
We see a lot of early recalls coming in on the side of Clemson. Jungler, top, and bot lane all recalling. Not able to pick up very substantial items on any of them aside for arguably the jungler as Sky Sapphire opens up onto Vici. We see a flash follow-up, burns the barrier. He's going to have to flash away as well, but he's going to go down for first blood. Sapphire might get traded back, gets out of turret range, able to stay alive.
Yeah, that's just the first appearance by Sky Sapphire resulting in first blood. The ghost is popped by Is That Him, a flash forward as well. They just have the CC and the damage to take down the Vel'Koz.
Right, it's a little bit greedy on the side of Vici, trying to just have to get away with the barrier. Allows himself to get followed up on with the rise and then takes too much damage that when he finally does flash away, Sky Sapphire follows and finishes him off under his turret.
Well, that's another first blood going over to the side of Georgia Tech, and much earlier than in the last game when it waited for level 6 to kind of make things happen. This one goes in pre-level 6, so 5 minutes into the game, they got themselves already a 1,000 gold advantage off of that, and off of slight CS advantages in their kind of carry positions, although the Olaf in the jungle CS is a little bit misleading. But does have 32 compared to 24 because has got that assist in mid lane.
Right, and it is kind of disheartening to see that kill go over. They had vision of Kha'Zix in the top side of their jungle. They had a warden there that saw him go in, look from counter.
Ooh, right.
Those Zyra plants, man, they just keep pelting you and you're not paying enough attention. You can go down pretty easy. We saw it happen to Double Up, happen to Golden Blue. Now Asian Devil's caught out as well. He's getting chunked out.
Lag.
A little bit of sloppy play on the side of Georgia Tech here as we see a jungle skirmish going down.
Yeah, and Vici's roamed down for this one as well, so Clemson making moves on the map. Georgia Tech maybe getting a little bit too far forward here. Is That Him is going to wind up getting slowed down by Vici. A little bit of damage coming out from the Void as well. The knockup and the flash forward from Isolated. They're going to wind up rooting him down. Vici's there to follow up as well. Sky Sapphire still only level 4. Think He Can Dance is charging through. Is going to get the slam down. And now Sky Sapphire's taking a lot of damage. And Isolated picks up a kill. Clemson respond. Well, he will burn down.
It's not quite over yet. Judgment had TP'd in behind. He's trying to go 1v2 versus the support and mid laner. He has his ultimate available, knocks up the Zyra, flash in by MF. She's going to help contribute in this kill as well. Now they continue on to Vici. He gets low. He's going down. Exhaust onto Jin. It's not over yet.
Oh, ADC Mike gets rooted up. Judgment, is he going to go down? Jin has to reload. One more shot. Will pick up the kill on Judgment. Now it's AD carry versus support. Despite it being Misfortune versus Jin, the crit shot is there. Rice Fox will disengage.
And despite all of that, it ends up just being a 3-for-3. Pretty crazy fight around the bot side river that started with Georgia Tech's bot lane getting a little greedy with their recalls.
Yeah, we're going to have a very lengthy replay to look at that one because this is all started off the fact that Ash and Misfortune were caught out of position and recalling in an awkward area, and then the flash aggressively from Zyra here really starts things off.
Right, and they weren't quite on the same page. It takes a little bit longer to get the damage down, but they still have the Olaf there to collapse. They finish off Rise. Sky Sapphire goes in a little bit too early. If he played that a little slower and let the Nautilus start that off, maybe he can jump in and start cleaning up kills, but he goes in first, focus down, he dies as well, but like we said, that Nautilus was TPing in behind, so they're able to start picking up kills, and then it's support and top laner trying to clean the rest of this up for the side of Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and we did wind up seeing ADC Mike being able to clean up a kill on Judgment here as he uses the dancing grenade and finally gets that lash shot off. But ADC Mike was roaming up towards the blue buff area. They saw the teleport coming in from Judgment and kind of zoned him away. He wasn't going to be able to walk directly into the Nautilus. But because of just the overcommitment, it wound up looking really good for Clemson, but then kind of turning out, like you said, just overall as an even trade as another appearance is made by Think He Could Dance in the mid lane, and Rise answers by activating his ghost and goes, you know, I got some moves of my own.
Right, but Think You Can Dance didn't really blow anything, didn't blow his own ghost, didn't blow his own ultimate. just able to force out a summoner for free, so ultimately a good play on the side of Clemson. As we see, CS leads for Hawkeye yet again on the top side, but that's more off the back of the fact that he didn't TP down to that crazy play that was happening and just pushed in the wave top.
Yeah, right on that. Judgment does wind up having a kill and an assist for himself, so they're going to be relatively close as far as the gold totals go. Bottom side of the map, Jin, although being a couple CS behind, has completed a serrated Dirk and picked up a pair of boots, but it's not going to be able to go anywhere if it gets locked up by a Enchanted Crystal Arrow. Asian Devil even flashing to reposition out of the Zyra route. The slows are down from Ash. One more shot from the volley will finish him off. Isolated in the meantime, going to take a lot of damage as Misfortune picks up a kill for herself using the bullet time.
Yeah, hits 6 after picking up the kill onto Jin, scales that up very quickly, and is able to use the ultimate to finish off the bot lane as Sky Sapphire.
Died to his own Krugs right there.
You know,
the greatest opponent on the Rift.
There were some interesting stats about where people died at jungle camps now and get executed. Number 1 is Raptors, no surprise, those little chickens do a lot of damage. And number 2 was in fact Krugs. We see that coming into play here.
I think it was heavily influenced by like early 2015 Spring Fnatic Reignover. I think every single time he played Olaf, he died to his Krugs in like the first couple weeks of the ULCS.
I think that was including all levels of play as well. That was not exclusive to competitive scene. As we see this bot lane play yet again, Ashe hits 6, flashes the root. Very important to being able to pick up this kill because we see that she has to work in these next couple auto attacks to be able to finish off AD carry Mike. We see the 6th level up off the kill. MF scales the ult quickly and finishes off the Zyra. Really well played double kill on the side of Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and this is just lane advantages now being gained by Georgia Tech. We kind of saw as soon as they hit level 6, it's like not only do they get their ultimates, but they unlock this ability where they're just able to move around and really start punishing Clemson for their mistakes. And, you know, a lot of that's going to be out of the CC. They're able to utilize the Lifeform Disintegration Ray in the meantime, putting in a lot of damage from Vici down onto Is That Him as we did see Isolated kind of roaming up and trying to get things started. Sky Sapphire and Is That Him, they were both extremely impactful in game number 1 for Georgia Tech. A lot of the rooms coming up from the Cassiopeia and Rengar combination looked extremely strong, but now that Vici and Think You Can Dance are on different champions this time around, the Vel'Koz and Olaf, less CC than the combination they had last game of everything. They're looking a lot more comfortable controlling kind of this duo coming out from the side of Georgia Tech.
Right, and I like what we see out of Clemson here. They decided to group mid, force down this bot turret because they chunked out the jungler and mid laner. Ultimately, they're going to keep putting the pressure down. They have a lot of poke champions available in zone control. So this is what I was talking about. This is exactly what their comp is going to be best at, getting set up in front of this turret. And as long as, you know, Judgment does get a nice TP flank off here, they might be able to grab first turret gold just off the back of some poke.
Well, they got Hawkeye on the opposite side, just kind of zoning them away, just threatening ever presently for that dive. So they are going to wind up picking up their first tower of the game. And this is, I mean, like we said, I went on a little bit of a tirade about the mid lane and the jungle kind of matchup, but overall, Clemson are doing things and making moves on the map happen a lot quicker than last game, and they don't necessarily, they seem a lot more in their element is like the biggest thing. They seem more comfortable.
Right, I think you can look at maybe focusing less on these tricky counter picks and more just what they're comfortable on. As we see, Is That Him opening up on the Vici, almost gets a kill, flashes in, forces the summoner trade. Ultimately, nothing ends up happening as Clemson secures the Earth Dragon. And like you were saying, yeah, they look a lot more comfortable on this more poke-focused comp.
I also really think a lot of it is Isolated Zyra. We saw him moving around, making his way towards mid lane, being able to roam up towards that blue buff and really kind of secure the kills in that because of the Zyra roots, as we see Judgment wailing away on that top lane tower, getting the second one for Georgia Tech. But the amount of CC coming out from different positions now, and like ADC Mike is on more of a utility pickup. Sure, Jin has a lot of damage, maybe not as much as Draven, especially early on, but he also has more utility. They have more poke. They have more of a solid game plan.
And he probably has more damage than Draven if you're building QSS first on Draven. So,
well, I mean, I could think of Urgot has more damage than Draven if he builds a QSS first.
A lot of things have more damage than Draven, is I think what we're saying here. If you're going QSS first,
don't build QSS first on Draven.
Right.
PSA.
Despite the fact that things are looking better for Clemson, it's still about a 2.5K gold deficit for that, or 3.5K almost. 2.5K, I can do math.
Don't ask me, I'm the stats guy.
Yeah, right. And so despite the fact that a lot of stuff is going better for them, they're still down kills, they're still down CS, and they're still down turrets ultimately. So they're going to have to continue to find opportunities to set up that kind of siege situation at various parts of the map where they're able to poke out Georgia Tech before Georgia Tech gets their engage off.
Well, we do see Georgia Tech trying to get one of those engages off, but they're standing on a penguin ward. And it doesn't look like they're going to get known or get anybody here, as they will be spotted and known that they are there. Vici and Isolated.
Penguin ward?
It's a penguin ward.
Oh, the ward skin.
Yeah.
I told you, I don't see these skins. I just see champions and ward and things.
It's a holiday penguin. He's got little skis.
He's
and
behind the wall.
hat.
He's hiding. I can't even see that.
It's because they're trying to gank.
I'm just saying, like, I don't generally see skins, and then you put it behind a wall. As Asian Devil walks a little too far forward, he almost gets melted, but instead it's Vici who gets popped.
Oh, they will answer a call with the curtain call, though. The Zyra Stranglethorns do go out. There's a teleport being channeled by Judgment, though. Is that him? Is he going to burn down? He has a health potion taken, so it looks like no. Hawkeye, in the meantime, has to flash out. The tanky Maokai taking a lot of damage, though. You did see the Deadly Flourish landing on Is That Him, but still with that health pot taking away, he will survive. It's a 1-for-1 overall.
That's what you can see happens. Very explosive team comps on both teams. It's very hard for them to also both chase forward. Clemson, they got the TP flank off with Hawkeye, but couldn't actually get down onto anybody as Judgment had matched. And it's very hard for Georgia Tech to chase in for more kills as well, given the zone control on the side of Clemson.
Yeah, as soon as the curtain call is kind of activated, it's like a whoa, hold on a second here. We are going to see in this replay here, we do see the Penguin being the hero, spotting out Asian Devil, but the Vel'Koz not having to complete a Morello Namakan yet, not able to cut through Asian Devil's health.
Right, but we see the Jin follow up, extremely long range, able to finish that kill off. And then on the side of Georgia Tech, Is That Him gets so low he can't really help out the rest of his team for the rest of this team fight. Has to be careful of the residual damage kind of coming in from the Zyra plants as both teams end up just disengaging after that.
I also lied, that's a Poro ward. That's not a Penguin ward that was in the brush. So they have Poros and Penguins helping them out.
I would never have corrected you, Tom. Like I said, you could tell me it's anything. I'd be like, all right, yeah.
I'll have to think of some very clever ward skins then and just start calling them that and see if you start using them throughout the broadcast.
Please don't do that to me. It's a very cruel thing to do.
Well, with that fight in the middle of the map, it's still about a 3,000 gold advantage for Georgia Tech. So while Clemson still kind of has this gold deficit they haven't been able to make up for, it's been about a couple of minutes since Georgia Tech has gained it, and they haven't necessarily increased it either, which means that we are going to start seeing some items being completed for both of these sides. The Spirit Visage was rushed first by Hawkeye, has not gone back and picked up a Banny Cinder or anything. He will have that fully completed magic resistance item, is isolated while stays true to his name and gets taken down by the Ash, causes a misfortune.
Right, and this is what I like outside of Georgia Tech. I was going to say that one of the reasons they stalled out is they keep getting forced into these 5v5 group up situations, which I don't think their comp inherently beats Clemson at least when they're both just standing there looking at each other. So trying to split them up and find more, like you said, isolated targets to pick off with their hard engage available to them is exactly how they need to extend this game. And being able to set up a potential 1-3-1 with the Rise in the side lane, rotating members over as the map opens up, I think Georgia Tech has the tools to abuse Clemson a little bit more, as long as they're not opting into these 5v5s, as we see Judgment thinking about swinging behind Hawkeye, ultimately turns back around.
And you mentioned with the 1-3-1 kind of setup potential coming out from Georgia Tech, they also have the Realm Warp and a Teleport on their side, whereas it's only going to be Hawkeye with the Teleport to really match up against somebody from the side of Georgia Tech. So you already are going to have that inherent map pressure because of the globals.
Well, right, and it's the fact that no one on the side of Clemson really wants to match in the side lanes that much. Obviously, you know, Nautilus versus Maokai, yeah, that's fine in the side lane, but then do you want to put your Vel'Koz 1v1 versus Rise in the side lane? No, not really. Is the Ash, or the Jin Zyra happy going against it? Yeah, they're okay, but then you have two people allocated down there, and Rise is happy to farm against that. So it is very hard for Clemson, if Georgia Tech sets up this 1-3-1 correctly, to punish. There's your Poro skin.
It's an astronaut Poro.
Is it?
Yeah.
I feel like you're just lying now. You told me.
That is legitimately an astronaut Poro. Although I don't necessarily know what space is like in Runeterra, but I'm assuming that that's the first Poro to ever go to space.
It's still on the ground right now, Tom.
Buzz Poro.
Could just be a prop. Might not be a real rocket ship.
Are you saying that there's conspiracy theory and Poros have never actually gone to space?
I haven't seen any evidence. They faked the moon landing.
I don't know about that.
Judgment's getting collapsed on here.
Yeah, well, Think You Dance is going to get that chain CC down the flash away from the Vel'Koz knockup as there. The Lifeform Disintegration Ray goes up. That's a very tanky Nautilus with Merc Treads, a Spectre's Cowl, Banny Cinder, a lot of HP, and they're not going to be able to melt through it.
Right, Georgia Tech needs to do a better job of securing vision here. You see that they only just recently got a couple deep wards on the bot side vision of Clemson. They have nothing in the top lane, so that's why that collapse on the top side was able to force out the flash from Judgment. Georgia Tech going to try and punish, though, starting off this Infernal Drake. Might be able to grab it.
Hawkeye is here to try to contest past the Vengeful Maelstrom, but the Dragon's already down. Now all the ultimates are coming out. The Enchant Crystal Arrow, the bullet time. Hawkeye's trying to survive for as long as possible. He's the one going down. He had no team around to back him up.
Right, this team was slowly collapsing, but they're coming from the middle of the river, so he trying to set up a pincer, but he just gets turned on right away, and Georgia Tech's able to pick up a kill on top of that Infernal Drake.
He also killed the penguin ward. That was so sad.
Can you get off the wards, Tom? There's other stuff happening in this
They
game.
keep zooming in on them. I can't. I gotta
Because
say
you
what's
keep talking about them.
them.
If you stop talking about them, they'll stop zooming in.
It's kind of like if you ignore it, they'll go away.
Yeah, that's my philosophy on a lot of things.
I mean, you're the one who always likes to analyze these teams' vision control.
Right, that doesn't mean talking about what the skin is of the ward.
I now understand why the LCS teams are not allowed to use ward skins in the LCS.
Because the casters are too
Stupid.
unfocused. Yeah, I wasn't gonna say it. I wasn't gonna call him out. That was Tom who said that.
Well, Georgia Tech, by taking that Infernal Dragon, has bolstered a little bit of their own powers. Now they have the bonus 88 AP from that. Doesn't give them a lot of the global gold side of things. It's still about a 3, now cresting into a 3,500 gold lead for themselves. But on the flip side, Clemson, they've kind of settled down now. And that's one of the things they didn't necessarily do in game one. Before, we were crediting them for the fact that they were continuing to be aggressive. They weren't getting anything from it. But now that they're being a little bit more controlled, a little more reserved, they went for a pick in the top lane onto the Nautilus of all people. It didn't pan out for them. And now that it looks like they're just kind of waiting for cooldowns and waiting for something to kind of happen to them.
Right, they were able to stem the bleeding, which is a big thing. And then they didn't completely end up sitting around doing nothing. Like you said, they did go for that pick on the top side, which is good to see. Georgia Tech talked about how they wanted to become better. As we see, is that him getting aggressive onto Vici. Good follow-up on the side of Ashe, finally getting that Ashe arrow coming in from over the wall, as now that the Vel'Koz is dead, they're going to force down this mid lane outer turret, going to be able to pick this one up finally.
Yeah, so the mid lane outer will go now after a chain CC combination from the side of Georgia Tech. They've now cracked open a lot of the map. They've had every single outer tower down. They've been able to utilize these ultimates almost on cooldown to kind of pick people out of position. We're not going to see our friend Rift Herald go down, but now that Baron is going to be a priority on the map, that could be somebody to look to focus. Last game, they had one interesting kind of Baron call where it was kind of bad for them, but they wound up bouncing back and taking another Baron after that. So now this is Georgia Tech. You want to work on macro play? Show me how you take these inner towers. Show me where your next focus is. Although the side of Clemson is going to be focusing down on Rice Fox here. Stingy If You Can Dance actually going to get taken down extremely low. The Jhin Ultimate's curtain call had been popped. The teleport was used by Judgment. He's going to be canceled though, so they will not have that global pressure.
Right, it's very important that the fact Clemson was actually able to get that global out. And as we see, they're not quite done yet. They want to chase down onto Ashe, but they get turned right back. Vici goes down, Ashe flashes in. He's going to trade her life right back. As Sky Sapper trying to get away, picks off the Jhin before taking the blast cone to get out. He's out of there. Now Ryze is coming in. He realm warps onto the other side of the wall, as it looks like Clemson might be able to get out now.
Yeah, Clemson has to retrieve from that one. A couple of aggressive flashes forward, and the Jhin walks into the brush where there's a Kazi just waiting there for him. Gets down the isolated claw. Sky Sapper actually jumps back in. He will trade his life for yet another kill, but both of the supports pick them up from that side. And that's it's a lot of sloppy fighting in that top side of the map.
Right, definitely is. And just to, get another look at how all that happened, it was a pretty crazy fight that kind of came out of nowhere, given the fact that Georgia Tech was just moving in for a little bit of vision control that started all this.
And originally started getting a catch on the Misfortune and then canceling the teleport, and then this happened.
Right, I mean, just too aggressive on the side of Vici. You are not a frontliner, as the Vel'Koz shouldn't be face checking the brush. He ends up doing it, gets very low. Ashe flashes in to finish him off, but goes down as a result. And then Sky Sapphire is able to pick up a kill as the Jhin took his turn to be a frontliner. He goes down as well, and then it looks like it should be the end of it, but Think You Can Dance dips back into the jungle, and Sky Sapphire wants a piece of him. Yeah,
it looks like he didn't realize that the Zyre was that close to him to lock him up afterwards. It just kind of jumped in, tried to get the isolated damage, even used the challenging smite just to get a little bit of the extra burn damage on him. But all in all, it's a crazy fight, but Georgia Tech still maintains a 5,000 gold advantage now after taking that mid lane tower and picking up a bunch of money in those kills, that fight afterwards. Fully stacked Rite of Ages now, as well as a Saracen Braids for Ryze. So is that him is completely online, as Isolated is completely offline as he gets taken down, just trying to get some Baron vision up. And now it's Georgia Tech collapsing down on the Vici once again. The Vel'Koz going face first into a brush. He's the one going down. ADC Mike is next in line. And Sky Sapphire with those evolved wings, hop, skips, and jumps himself to a double kill. And, well, I guess that's Baron.
Yeah, that's 3 down on the side of Clemson. Georgia Tech's going to have to try and force down this Baron now. Think You Can Dance does have his ultimate available, so he can potentially run in and contest, but I doubt Georgia Tech is going to let that happen. It's going to be pretty easy for them to secure this Baron.
Well, I asked the question, Georgia Tech, how are you going to break these tier 2 towers? They're going to do it with the Baron by establishing vision control, skins be damned, and it's just picking off the opposing team from Clemson. Clemson thought that they were going to be able to catch people out in their own jungle, but they just didn't have the coordination to do it like Georgia Tech did.
Right, we talked about how Clemson, or Georgia Tech's vision control hadn't been great around the weak side where the Nautilus was playing to. Here, without his TP, they say, forget it, let's just bring him up to the top side, force around the Baron, and he's able to get some nice CC off onto Jin and able to pick up a couple kills for Georgia Tech, which opened up the Baron. And from here, going to want to see how they decide to allocate their lanes to force the objectives.
Well, Nautilus has grouped up with what looks like a lot of his team on the bottom side of the map, but that's because Dragon is spawning in 15 seconds. So that's going to be the next objective for them. Nautilus has his teleport available, so he's going to be able to have a Baron buff and a teleport available for whatever sort of split push position Georgia Tech chooses to go into. You mentioned a very powerful 1-3-1 setup. They get the Cloud Drake. There's going to be extra movement speed to rotate around. They're denying vision. Everything. This is looking like it took a little bit longer for them to get online this game, but this is looking like game one Georgia Tech.
Right, they've definitely picked it up initially, from where they were initially, excuse me. They're at now 16 kills in 24 minutes. It's going to be hard for them to catch up to that more kills than minutes in the game that they had last time, but
never say never.
You never say never, especially in the collegiate scene. As we see them deciding to go with 5 men on the bottom side of the map, which allows Hawkeye to split push down the top side turret by himself. But Georgia Tech's going to try and force with the wave that Rise is pushing in now.
They're doing this the kind of go-to setup we see a lot of competitive teams do. You have a Baron buff, you push 2 lanes that are connected by the jungle, and then you have established forward vision control in the enemy side of the jungle. So you can either freely rotate between whatever one you get the tower down in first, or you can catch people out of position like that wasn't in the jungle, so it's not exactly the best example, but the Vel'Koz steps up, he gets taken down because the reaction from Clemson is just not as coordinated as you are on the side of Georgia Tech.
Right, and with that pick going on to Vel'Koz, that eliminates a lot of the wave clear and poke that you have to worry about if you're Georgia Tech. So now they're going to be able to force onto these turrets that much easier as Rise splits bottom, getting damage down, but the collapse is coming in. He's going to be forced to ghost away, but that opens up the mid lane to get pushed down now for the side of Georgia Tech. They're just running them around the map as Nautilus has decided to go top side and start getting that wave going for him.
Yeah, so Nautilus, well, he does have his teleport available if they so choose to do so. Asian Devil going to get tagged by 1, 2, 3. Not the last shot coming out from the curtain call. Isolated wound up using his own Stranglethorns as well. The side of Clemson are going to be forcing Georgia Tech away from their own base, but not before suffering some damage.
Right, and you talked about the lane setups that Georgia Tech had. I have to say, I didn't quite like it, the fact that they allowed the Maokai to split push the turret down, which then sets this offset situation where the Maokai, or the Nautilus has to go top later to get the wave pushing for him. That's when all this stuff started happening later, where you see the side of Georgia Tech forced to back off their turrets. It would have been much nicer if they got 3 lanes pushing right all the way at the same time, so that stuff like this is easier to do, where you're able to force people in the side lanes and pick them off. Rise grabs a pretty easy kill onto the Vel'Koz there. And the question is, what can Georgia Tech really get off it? Because they really, really want an inhib turret.
Well, everybody else seems to have recalled and bought a bunch of items. They got a bit of Baron buff left. There's still about at least 15 to 20 seconds left on that one. Rice Fox is run down to group up with Is That Him. The rest of the team is pushing down in the mid lane. They looks like they're going to try to rinse and repeat. The Enchanted Crystal Arrow winds up landing isolated. The bullet time is opened up, and that is a Black Cleaver Last Whisper Misfortune picking up a kill basically just off of the CC.
I mean, that is the threat. That's why you go Ashe MF. It just makes it a living hell for anything that doesn't have any kind of mobility, as we see, especially with Kha'Zix being able to jump in as well, start grabbing some resets. Hawkeye goes in, tries to CC Sky Sapphire down. He's going to get focused, forced out of the fight, goes down to the revived Vel'Koz. This fight's going pretty well for Clemson.
Yeah, the Lifeform Disintegration Ray will evaporate Kha'Zix. It looks like the depth charge used by Judgment. He has to turn around and flash out. Roots up onto Hawkeye, but he twisted advances back forward. They're going to pick up a kill onto Judgment, and this is looking pretty good for Clemson, but Asian Devils joined the fight. He forces the flash out of the Vel'Koz. Rice Fox will go to be a 7-0-6 air quotes support misfortune, as the Jin ultimate does wind up ending. Asian Devil will pick up that inhibitor kill. He's not done though. He's saying, actually, I'm the AD carry. Volleys and picks himself up a double kill, and now Vel'Koz is the only one left alive. Rise did wind up falling on the back end of that fight, but the Enchanted Crystal Arrow is back up. Asian Devil's gonna take down a kill. Rice Fox barely survives. That's an ace for Georgia Tech, and they set their sights on the base.
They heard what you said about supports being the carries now. Asian Devil says, that's not the case. Let me get in here. Let me get some kills. He gets up to 7 kills himself, both at 7 kills and 8 assists. Unfortunately, Asian Devil with the 2 deaths.
Yeah, I mean, this is originally it was kind of looking like support Ashe and AD carry Misfortune, but things turned around in this fight, and this is just Georgia Tech saying, hey, our Baron buff has expired, but we've cracked open your base. We're going to go in and go for kills.
And it was a really nice start to the fight as well, the fact that they're able to focus down onto multiple members. I think Olaf would have done much better here, following up with the Maokai, diving onto the backline potentially instead of trying to peel the Nautilus, which honestly you don't do that well. And then here we see Asian Devil finally joins the fight after cracking the middle inhib turret, and he's able to melt a couple members of Clemson. And then this is just overstaying your welcome a little bit, getting too aggressive. Zyra respawn quickly, wants to run forward and get a root down, just easily sidestepped. And it's so easy to turn back against those two low health members and pick up a double kill. Just like that.
Just so easy.
Yeah, it's just easy to do that.
AD carries in 2017, so easy, Mark.
Yep.
But it does look like now that Georgia Tech have 2 inhibitors down, waves of super minions pushing in. There's a Dragon and a Baron spawning in just a little bit over a minute if they need that. We're approaching 28 minutes, so it's already a minute longer than their previous game against Clemson, but they can just group up as many people as they want on this top side. Eventually, Clemson's going to have to deal with those super minions pushing into their base, and they don't even necessarily need to take a full-on team fight at this point to really do anything, and they still have all that catch potential on their side.
Right, it's pretty easy to play this slowly from here. Just get a little chip damage on the turret slowly as the mid and bottom waves push in on their own due to the super creeps being in there. And you still do have to be worried about poke damage. If you try and get some damage onto the turret at the wrong time and you get a Vel'Koz Q or some Zyra damage, you might get forced out and delay the game a little bit longer. But worst case scenario, you back off, you grab the Baron and Dragons that are each spawning in 3 minutes respectively, and then you get back to it.
Well, there is a ZZ Rot portal pushing into the top side as well, so just applying ever so slightly more pressure as the super minions have reached the Nexus Tower. So looks like that the side of Georgia Tech, the Dreadslane goes in, but the flash forward is that him is going to get locked up. But Ricebox goes legendary as they immediately melt the Zyra. The Vel'Koz will fall. Jhin will finally pick up the Rise, but that's just one target that has fallen. Hawkeye in the meantime trying to take as much damage as possible. Kha'Zix on the backside pushing the super minions in towards the Nexus, and the rest of Georgia Tech are just going to forego that tower as Asian Devil gets left behind by his team. He is going to wind up going down to the tower eventually as Maokai will pick up that kill, but he trades his life. The rest of the base is in shambles. Super minions are taking down the towers. The Nexus winds up falling, and that's Georgia Tech taking a 2-0 series versus Clemson.
And Rice Fox secures the title of the best AD carry on Georgia Tech, ends up 9-0-9 and finishes the game. You're going to have to give it to him over Asian Devil. Rice Fox is the best AD carry on the team.
I don't know, man. It's between Rice Fox and the Penguin Ward is my favorite AD carry in that game.
The Penguin Ward didn't do anything, Tom. Drop it.
All right. Well, they dropped a lot of wards on that map, but I'll drop the case of the ward. But that was just Georgia Tech cementing themselves as these are 2 teams that are in the same group. They were the battle for potentially the second place team. Both of them lost to Virginia. We saw why Georgia Tech took a 2-1 against them, whereas Clemson wound up going into a 0-2 in that situation. I'm sorry, a 1-2 for Georgia Tech.
Right.
But they played their game extremely well. They did it with, they knew what is strong in the meta. They knew how to execute that composition, and they didn't necessarily have a lot of lapses in the way they played their game.
Right, and they talked about the fact that they wanted to improve their macro and kind of went through there. There were a couple of small missteps where they didn't have vision when they needed it, or maybe their lane allocations weren't 100% right, but they were rarely extremely costly mistakes. They really didn't throw the game at any point, which is the big concern in these looser kind of games where there's a ton of kills going down, is that you just keep fighting and fighting and fighting, and then you die and you hand kills over, and then you allow the other team back in the game. They didn't really have any situation like that over the course of these 2 games, so a very good series overall for Georgia Tech.
Yeah, every time Clemson really tried to catch somebody out of position, it was more the fact that Georgia Tech was kind of there to be able to respond to what they were doing, as opposed to kind of, like, they knew that was going to happen, so they had the proper response ready. They weren't playing reactively, they were still playing proactively in the way that they moved around the entirety of the map, but it just wound up being, it was in a way that they were able to shut down what Clemson was going to want to do.
And on the side of Clemson, it was a better game, of course. We got to see a more focused poke comp, and they showed that they seemed to understand what they wanted to do, grouping mid early, an example of that.
Yeah, so why don't we take a look back at game number 2 and check out some of the replays that happened later on in the game, is where things really kind of started to heat up and go in Georgia Tech's favor, including this gank in the jungle, where it was a very elongated kind of catch, but they wound up getting this one, and they wound up turning into Baron after.
Right, we talked about their Baron control, or vision control, being extremely strong. We see the Ashe being able to basically isolate out the Zyra, blow her up for just trying to get some vision down, and Judgment this time grouped up with the team, able to open up onto the Vel'Koz, get the fight started onto him, which gives the reset to Sky Sapphire to keep going, follow up onto the next carry of the Jhin. They pick him up, and then with those 3 kills down, it's extremely difficult for Clemson to have any hope of contesting the Baron that Georgia Tech went to right after that.
Right, and a lot of the catch potential coming out from this was centered around the Ashe pick. We joked about Misfortune being the better AD carry because she was the 9-0-9 score line, was able to delete people with basically an AD carry build going for a Sightstone upgrade, but Ashe was a very key part of this composition, as we could see in the next replay. 26 minutes, one of these reasons they wound up getting these 2 inhibitors and finally cracking the base is just off the fact that all she had to do was provide the CC for, I guess, the real AD carry to clean up the kill.
Yeah, here you see just that exact situation. The MF just blowing up whoever gets hit by the Ashe arrow, and that started off a pretty extended sequence that happened here in the bot lane where Georgia Tech's able to take down the inhib turret, and then Zyra is going to eventually respawn, but not until Sky Sapphire goes a little crazy. Vel'Koz comes flying in with the home guards. He's going to be able to get a lot of damage down onto the back line as well. Sky Sapphire goes down, and this is what I was talking about, where I think if Olaf wanted to continue helping out the Maokai chase down some targets, maybe that would have worked better than trying to peel the Nautilus, who ultimately ends up getting away, and they just turn the kills back, and it's still looking all right on the side of Clemson until Asian Devil shows up and says, I'm an AD carry too, don't forget about me. He's going to be able to pick up a number of kills on the back of the end of this fight. As I mentioned before, here comes that Zyra. She's very excited to get back in the fight and just whoop, quick little sidestep.
We're a little too excited there as we see the double kill with the volley coming out from the side of Ashe right there. So very, very solid stuff coming out from Georgia Tech. And I mean, this is the team that made it to the semifinals last year. They lost to UBC, but they're looking extremely, extremely strong. But this kind of raises a question because we haven't gotten a chance to see very many teams in the Campus Series broadcast yet. We only get a chance to cover one best of 3 every single week. But if this is what Georgia Tech looked like against Clemson, I'm really afraid of what Virginia looks like because they beat both of these teams.
Right. I mean, Georgia Tech did show a lot of good stuff in this series. So if you know their one loss is to Virginia, it was a 1-2. Who knows how close those games could be? Is Virginia significantly better than Georgia Tech, or are they a little bit better? We're not exactly sure right now.
Well, we only get a limited scope for teams, but why don't we take a look at the schedule coming up for next week so we can see who else is going to be on the Campus Series broadcast. Next week, we got Western Kentucky versus Kansas State next week, and this is going to be a little bit of a, not necessarily a grudge match, but I know both of these teams have kind of butt heads with each other in the Campus Series before.
Right, and we're going to have to see who will come out on top of that rivalry matchup next week.
Next week, of course, but that is going to be it for our show today. So thank everybody for watching, and we hope to see you again next week. Suppression of my own, but there we see the wild growth being used to kind of counteract that. Keep on thinking you can dance alive. Sky Sapphire is coming in, and Think You Can Dance is going to get bowled up and taken down for first blood. It looks like Think You Can Dance trying to make something happen. Is Guanya going to get the infinite duress down onto the Ashe, but he's going to get a lot of trade damage as Rengar comes in. He's going to try to donate the kill over to Ashe. Think You Can Dance stays alive for a little bit longer, and Maokai will come and pick up 2 kills for himself. Ashe gets a third.
It's a whitewash,
fourth winds up going over to Maokai, and that is just disaster for Clemson.
Where is Vici in any of these fights? He's being scared and building defensively, as we see.
Ooh, Enchanted Crystal Arrow into a flash and Nethergrass. Vici will survive, however, a flash away. The Wild Growth comes out as well. A flash roar from Asian Devil. Sky Sapphire's in the fight as well. They committed a lot here on the side of Georgia Tech, but Clemson can't turn it around.
As we see, Clemson trying to get something going here.
Yeah, he winds up using the Realm Warp after the paralyzing gaze is used. Think You Can Dance will wind up locking up, but he winds up going down. Asian Devil in the front getting the first kill. Sky Sapphire will jump in. He was extremely low, but it's going to be at the cost of a lot of Clemson lives. And the rest of Georgia Tech have grouped back up in the mid lane. The Rengar ultimate has been popped, and it looks like instead of trying to just strangle them out, they're going straight for the jugular. Nexus is taking a lot of damage. Think You Can Dance in the back line, trying to get on the Asian Devil with the paralyzing gaze and the Nethergrass come out. Hawkeye's going to wind up missing the Poppy ultimate. He's going to go down. Judgment's just zoning him away back onto the Summoner platform, all the way in their own base. The Nexus goes down, and Georgia Tech takes a 27-minute victory over Clemson. As well as the Saracen Brace for Rise. Is that him is completely online, as Isolated is completely offline, as he gets taken down, just trying to get some Baron vision up. And now it's Georgia Tech collapsing down on the Vici once again. The Vel'Koz going face first into a brush. He's going to want it going down. ADC Mike is next in line. The Sky Sapphire does evolve wings, hop, skips, and jumps himself to a double kill. But Asian Devils joined the fight. He forces the flash out of the Vel'Koz. Rice Box will go to be a 7-0-6 air quotes support misfortune, as the Jhin ultimate does wind up ending. Asian Devil will pick up that inhibitor kill. He's not done though. He's saying, actually, I'm the AD carry. Volleys and picks himself up a double kill. Kha'Zix's on the backside, pushing the super minions in towards the Nexus, and the rest of Georgia Tech are just going to forego that tower as Asian Devil gets left behind by his team. He is going to wind up going down to the tower eventually, as Maokai will pick up that kill, but he trades his life. The rest of the base is in shambles. Super minions are taking down the towers. The Nexus winds up falling, and that's Georgia Tech taking a 2-0 series. Although I don't necessarily know what space is like in Runeterra, but I'm assuming that that's the first portal ever.
Still on the ground right now, Tom.
Buzz portal.
Could just be a prop might not be a real rocket ship.
Are you saying that there's conspiracy theory and Poros have never actually gone to space?
I haven't seen any evidence. They faked the moon landing.
I don't know about that.